Good morning, developers. If you're new to the channel, my name is Rob, and I made something really cool that I'm really proud of. A JavaScript driven with some Python that's voice activated Raspberry Pi toy car or robot car, whatever you wanna call it. And the point of this video is not to show you that, for one thing. As you can see, it is in pieces right now. I've got parts everywhere here. That will be for later videos. I'll show you how I made it and the parts that I use, all of that stuff. As that's one of the really cool things I think about being a software person is taking a Raspberry Pi and kind of bridging that gap between hardware and software. The hardware that runs my code, getting to the point where I can actually harness it and do some cool robotic stuff. That's really, really empowering. But the purpose of this video, if you're going to go on this journey with me, or if you're on your own journey, I made 3 incredibly stupid or silly or at least correctable mistakes at the very beginning that cost me a couple hours every day for several weeks. And I'm talking like at the very beginning. I had nothing to show for my work after a couple weeks. And this is as a very experienced software person. That was really, really hard. The only reason I made it to the end is because I've tried this a couple times making this car, and I've always run out of steam, and then I get distracted and do something else. I decided this time I'm going to finish no matter what happens. It just was an absolute grind, and they're so fixable, and I want to share my experience with you to help you avoid the same mistakes. Thing number 1 is the SD card. If you're not familiar with how this stuff works, what I've got here, you may not even be able to see it. I'm putting it up against my blue shirt here. It is an SD card. So it's like a tiny, basically a tiny hard drive. One of the reasons why I use Raspberry Pis as opposed to like an Arduino or something else like that, again, as a software person, this makes so much more sense to me. Raspberry Pi has their own operating system called Raspbian. It's tailor-made to run on a Pi. It's basically a flavor of Ubuntu. It's Debian based, but it's basically Ubuntu. So by just running their software tool, and it comes with a great tool where you just put this in your port, it will take care of everything. It's loaded on there. You put it in here, and you've got a little computer with some cool pins running Ubuntu with a nice desktop. And you can SSH in if that's what you prefer. As opposed to an Arduino, where you kind of are starting from the other side, where it's more about the electrical components, circuit design, that kind of thing. All of my electrical engineer friends, they go from Arduino to Raspberry Pi. I prefer to start here because I can code here, I understand the environment, and then go maybe towards an Arduino if the project dictates it. But the problem that I had is that the format process that Raspbian takes to make this, it takes about an hour to get up and running for the whole process to go through, get it in the right place, put it in the Pi, install a couple basic things so that you can actually start working. And I think it just had to have been a bad card. I don't know, because I'm not having these issues anymore. But the Pi would all of a sudden reboot a couple times, and then it would say that it was corrupted, or I would figure out that it was corrupted, and I had to reformat it. It took like an hour. I'm sitting there waiting to get started again. All that it took once after a couple days of grinding is to buy another one of these, put it in, get the other one formatting, and then if that happens, I pop this one out and swap them. If it happens again, swap them, because this one is now ready. It was a really, really easy fix. At the very least, make sure your SD card is good, but even if it is good, sometimes that still happens, and this is a really, really easy way to keep working, to keep active. Once I got past that, the second thing I learned is that sometimes it is the hardware's fault. This one is really difficult for me because, again, as a software person, the thing that I know how to troubleshoot is the code. I can fiddle around with Ubuntu and install and add packages, and I can switch languages even. I switched a couple times to try and figure out, why is this not working? And as a guy maybe with a hammer, everything is a nail, right? As a software person, everything has to be software related. But I've got over here a big plastic sack, which if you've ever done stuff with Raspberry Pis or Arduinos, you probably have one too. I've got a box. Actually, I've got a couple boxes. I got my first Raspberry Pi back in 2008, and I slowly accumulated stuff, keeping stuff in there for like 8, 10, 15 years. Probably not the best way to store it. But I went and grabbed it out of there because, again, I've tried this a couple times. Here's a driver controller. It's hooked up to a battery here. I flip that on, and There we go. One of the wires had popped out, but I turned the battery pack on and the red light comes on. Okay? Again, as a software person, I assume that means that this controller is good. But it's not good. It took me a very long time to figure out that whether the ports or something has gone bad, I don't know. It sat in there for years, and that's probably what happened. They're cheap to begin with. It's like $1.50, $2 for one of those driver boards. And if you don't know what they're for, it's hooked up to the motor here, and the shaft spins, and we connect that to the wheel. We have to have something that we connect to the Raspberry Pi. That thing went bad. And not just that one, but I've got a whole bunch here. Here's another one. Here's another one. And I have a couple more yet. I just had to buy a new pack for like $9. And all of a sudden, everything started working. At least one portion did. So as a software person, it is okay to assume the possibility that it is the hardware's fault when you move into this realm. Number 3 thing is the GPIO pinout. And if you don't know how this works, if you're new to this world, I will briefly explain. Different circuit boards have different numbers of pins. This is the actual working Pi that I use. It has, a Raspberry Pi always has 40 pins. So it's 20 across the top, 20 across the bottom. The same thing's true over here. They're inside the case here, but all of them end up working the same. This one doesn't have the pins set in there. But there are 2 different ways to look at it. I just use the physical pin number. So if someone said GPIO pin 23, I just went to these pins and counted over 23. There's an actual pinout that I'll put up on the screen here. When you see GPIO 23 here, that means you want to use pin 23 in your code. It doesn't mean the physical pin 23. So this is a really simple thing that probably is really obvious to you if you've used these before, but I didn't know that. And so every time I was trying my code, still fighting with these other 2, depending on the day, I might have to try the same pin number 4 different ways, right? Different pinouts, different pins, move everything around, trying to figure out what's wrong. Using the right pinout makes a really, really big difference, okay? There are lots of other things I learned, but these at least are 3 of the big ones. The SD card, get a good one, and use more than one so that if you have something go bad, you can swap them out. Sometimes the pins have gone bad. Sometimes the controller turns on, but it's not going to actually do what you want it to do. The battery pack's pretty straightforward, so that part is pretty easy. But make sure before you spend weeks trying to troubleshoot your software that your hardware is good. And lastly, use the correct GPIO pinout. Use the right labels in your code because those are the ones that all of the modules are going to expect. Please keep an eye out for the videos where I will show you what this thing can do, how I made it. You can follow along. And like I said, I'll drop in the description some of the links when those videos are done, as well as some of the products that I use. I will see you then.